Hello everyone. So I've received a message this morning with a lot of sharing. But in this video I want to talk about a particular question that was asked to me by this friend, which was, why don't you talk about therapy? Now, it may sound strange to people who follow me on YouTube because I do talk a lot about therapy. But this person was someone who follows my page, whether it's here at Tao of Economics on Facebook. And clearly they got the impression that I do not talk about therapy there. Let's be clear about this. I do talk about therapy a lot. When I talk about the path and the journey, I'm 90% talking about therapy. My path, my journey was through therapy. And I am 100% sure that your path and your journey is also through therapy. But not for all of you, not for everyone. There are people who can benefit a lot from what I talk about, may not need therapy. And that's mostly because the key point here is that for me there was a massive spiritual awakening. There was a profound connection to my own intuition, to my own higher self, to the universe, to source. And I think that's part, when I talk about those aspects and those things, those are things that speak and relate to a lot of people who may not have experienced trauma, who may not come from a place of depression, anxiety, and childhood issues. And therefore, that part still speaks to them, but therapy may not be, or traditional therapy may not be, or standard or regular therapy may not be needed for them. But for the most part, I do talk to people for whom therapy is absolutely the journey. When I talk about the path and the journey, of course I'm talking about something of a spiritual nature, of a higher nature, of the path of consciousness, evolution of consciousness. But in practical terms, I'm referring a lot to therapy itself. Therapy works. And therapy is the key of the journey. Therapy is that journey itself. However, traditional psychotherapy did not work for me. And I want to be very clear about that. And not only for me, but the very few occasions I had to share with other men with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, they told me it didn't work for them either. They healed in other ways. And I healed in other ways. Psychoanalysis, traditional psychotherapy, psychology, CBT, those stuff didn't work for me. And in my experience, with friends and people I've met, it didn't work for them either. It may work for some people, but let's clarify a bunch of things. So first of all, traditional psychotherapy can mean a lot of different things. So the core of traditional psychotherapy is what we imagine a psychologist be, what we see in watching movies, all right? And that, for me, doesn't work. I have no idea how it could work for something that is deep and profound. Then there are probably a lot of different branches of psychotherapy and could work for some people. And a lot of that really depends. I mean, when it does work, it's because the therapist, himself or herself, is extremely good and has extremely deep knowledge by experience of what he's talking about, what you are talking about. And so it brings an emotional aspect and uses different things and approaches. But traditional psychotherapy, in the end, so they call it a science, but in the end it's basically the approach that each individual therapist follows. And lots of therapists may just follow whatever they've been taught, and some others, they create their own psychotherapy that is not psychotherapy anymore. It is their own thing. And I'm referring to a guy that I think is extremely good in this, which is Pete Walker. I mention him quite often because his book is by far, in my opinion, in my amazing hypnotherapist opinion from years ago, is by far the best book ever written about complex CPD. I did say complex twice, right? Because C stands for complex. So I don't know, we could spend another minute or so talking about this C thing. But let's move on. And basically what he does is like it's already like completely removed from university level kind of psychotherapy. He does his own thing. He does what he learned through his own journey and his client's journey, what actually does work, what he's learned by himself and of himself. And that's exactly how things work well for clients. So now I'm going to list a few reasons why traditional psychotherapy, psychology, whatever you want to call it, didn't work for me, and I believe, and didn't work for a lot of other people. Number one, they call the issue at hand, they call it mental health. They're already wrong from the very beginning. I mean, they're already focusing on one tiny aspect of a massive thing and not on the core of the issue. And so they treat it like hard science, like a malfunctioning computer. It is a brainy intellectual approach to a problem, and that's not what heals you. That's not where healing comes from. Because it misses, crucially, it misses the emotional and the body-mind connection. So they are very well aware that there is an emotional component. They talk about emotions. You will talk about emotions all the time in traditional psychotherapy. And yet, because you're not accessing directly, you're not getting to the root, you're not going and touching those emotions where they are, it doesn't work, is nowhere near as powerful as other approaches which are based on the person knowing what he's talking about. All right. I remember my psychoanalyst that kept saying, oh, we talk about emotions. We talk about emotions. Yes, we talk about them. We think about them. We're not bringing them up. We're not bringing them up and making them alive, at least here in the session. And also, what I mean by they miss the emotional component is that the traditional psychotherapist has been trained to be neutral, to be a wall of gum, to be an intellectual person that objectively, rationally, logically fixes your way of thinking or your ways of behavior, or tells you rationally why you're experiencing whatever emotions, telling you that it's okay because this happened and stuff like that. You're always on the intellectual level and you're not getting anywhere. I mean, you're probably progressing, you're going somewhere, but it's not like the breakthrough that you want and that you need, because you want to heal. You don't want to understand why you're not fine. All right. And so in my experience, for example, if you find an extremely skilled hypnotherapist or hypnoanalyst, that's so much more powerful. Or you start crying because they are able to connect with those emotions. They go to the root and they understand and are aware of what exactly the process is and how to speak to you about that process. But obviously 19% of hypnotherapists are not very good. But some of them are absolutely amazing, insanely amazing, and I speak by experience. I've worked with a couple of them that were absolutely beasts of hypnoanalysts. Problem with hypnotherapists is that it's conceived to be like a short-term thing, and a short-term thing is never ever going to fix a complex, deep-rooted problem. So what I did with them was, I call it hypnoanalysis, but I just made that word up, because the truth is that there is no science, there is no common knowledge about this kind of stuff, except Freud and Jung, that you may be familiar with, right? And then it's a bunch of people that came up with their own understanding of things through their own personal stories and experience. Pete Walker, James Bruckshaw, Tara Brach, go on. Those are, or those people, hypnotherapists that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is that basically it doesn't take you on a journey. It approaches the problem as an intellectual problem that needs to be solved and fixed. And that's not really how healing works. At least not in my experience. I've come to believe that healing is really a journey, is a path. It's a deeply rooted path within your life, which is extremely emotional in nature and spiritual as well. And traditional psychotherapy doesn't take you through that. So it may be good. I mean, the best I've heard from direct experience is someone who told me that CBT helped them cope better. So that, I think, maybe some form of therapies are really good at helping you coping with shit. But I never wanted to cope. I wanted to heal. And that's what I talk about here. I don't teach you, I don't share tips. I do sometimes share tips and tools that help coping, because that's important. It's part of, like, you know, limiting the suffering and helping people. But my ultimate goal, what drives me, is the breakthrough, is the healing. And you need a journey which is emotional, spiritual, energetic, and neuronal in nature. And all but one of these components are missed a lot in traditional psychotherapy. So another missing bit is the energy work isn't there. That's so important. Therapy that works creates a space, creates an energy between you and the therapist, around you, that holds you, and that energy works, that energy dynamic, that energy that you can't see, that you can't put your head around, is what heals you. It's what takes you on that journey, and what really makes you make gigantic steps and navigate through difficult stuff, overcoming it and moving past it. An amazing therapist is someone which creates that energy space and drives that energy work. And you may not be aware of it, especially at the beginning of the journey. But that is the goal. That is what heals you, not the parasympathetic, sympathetic parts of the brain and blah blah blah. All of that stuff is also important, because of course there is a psychological, there's a huge psychological component to it. But the point here, the question here, is how to heal you. It's not to understand at psychological level what kind of things are happening or going on. To understand them from an emotional, with your soul, not with your brain, with your logical mind. And here I go back to a point that I already mentioned, which is that a lot of psychotherapists, they haven't really healed themselves. So they don't know how you feel. This can be they haven't healed themselves because they didn't need to heal themselves, or because they just didn't. They just didn't. A lot of the times, I mean, I read on groups and stuff, I read, it felt like as if it was like a blind man teaching a cripple to walk. And so, if they haven't been on that journey themselves, how can they know in depth what you're going through and what needs to be said or done? What kind of energy needs to be created for you to heal? They can't. So ultimately, they can't hold you and they can't sense you, because it's not truly understanding, truly creating this energy space. It's done when the therapist can sense what's going on with you, can sense what is going on with you at emotional level, and also obviously understand what kind of processes, what kind of things can have happened in your past. But they sense that through their intuition, through their, not through their rational, logical mind. And this sensing is a fundamental component of great therapy that works. And in my experience, in traditional psychotherapy, that is lacking a lot, because they're not trained for that. This is not to say that it doesn't work for no one, or that they're no good. Doesn't mean, that's not what I'm saying at all. Also because, as I said before, there are like a billion different things and a billion different approaches, and ultimately it goes down to the person you're working with. There is no escaping that. The approach is important, and to me, traditional psychotherapy is the least likely to actually work. But then there is also the person, and whether you're a good fit, and what's the personal history, whether they are talented, intuitive. So I think I've said enough in this video about this issue. But let me restate this. Therapy, although I don't always call it therapy, and I prefer to call it the journey or the path, is at the very, very core of this channel, of my Facebook page, of my work, of my sharing, of my experience, and of what I'm talking about. Have a great day. See you.